A cold wind swept through the rugged mountains as a lone man appeared on the trail, carrying a tiny, fragile bundle in his arms. The baby's breaths were shallow, each one a desperate whisper against the biting air. The mountain man's face was weathered and stern, yet his eyes held a deep, unwavering concern. He had come from miles away, guided by a sense of urgency he couldn't ignore. Every second counted, and every step brought him closer to an unknown fate. But he wasn't alone in the wilderness that day. Through the mist and the shadows, he spotted her young woman sitting on a fallen log, her hands trembling, her face streaked with tears. She was calling out, her voice cracking, searching for someone or something she had lost. Her grief was raw, the kind that could pierce the heart of anyone who saw it. And in that instant, their worlds collided. His mission to save a dying child, and her desperate search for a lost son. Neither knew what the other would reveal, yet an invisible thread seemed to tie their fates together. Could the mountain man offer hope to the woman, even as he struggled to save the baby in his arms? Or was this encounter destined to bring more heartbreak? As the wind howled and the forest grew quiet, the tension hung heavy between them. One life teetered on the edge, another was lost in sorrow, and a mysterious connection began to form, leaving a question no one could answer yet. Would they find the help and answers they so desperately needed? The mountain man shifted the baby slightly, feeling the tiny chest rise and fall, though the breaths were still weak. He studied the woman carefully, noticing the fear in her eyes. The kind of fear that only comes from losing someone you love more than life itself. She didn't notice him at first, her voice trembling, as she called the name over and over, hoping for an answer that would never come. He remembered the path that had led him here. Days earlier, he had been traveling through the mountains when he had heard about a child found alone near a steep ravine. Without thinking, he had followed the trail, guided by instinct and a sense of responsibility he couldn't explain. The baby had been barely alive when he found it, wrapped in a thin blanket and trembling from cold and fear. Every mile he had walked since then had been a fight against time, against nature, and against the fear of losing this little life before he could reach help. Now, seeing the woman's grief, he sensed something deeper, something unspoken. She wasn't just crying for a child she had lost. There was a story behind those tears, a secret tangled with pain and desperation. And yet, she didn't know that a fragile life rested in his arms. A life that might somehow be connected to the loss she was mourning. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath. Shadows stretched across the ground, and the distant howl of a wolf reminded them both of how isolated they were. In that moment, the mountain man realized their encounter was no accident and that the answers they sought might be buried in the very tragedy that had brought them together. The mountain man knelt down, carefully adjusting the baby in his arms, trying to shield it from the cold gusts that cut through the trees. The woman's sobs had softened to quiet murmurs, but her eyes never left the shadows of the forest, as if she feared that at any moment, her lost child might appear or that someone else might take the truth from her. Something in her voice had hinted at more than just loss. There was confusion, regret, and a story untold, and the mountain man sensed that uncovering it could change everything. He took a deep breath and spoke gently, asking her if she knew the baby, if somehow these two broken paths had crossed before. She flinched at the question, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders. Yet she didn't look away. Her silence spoke louder than words, and the mountain man realized he was walking into a web of grief far more complicated than he had imagined. Meanwhile, memories of his own past flickered in his mind, the life he had left behind in the mountains, the promise he had made to protect those too weak to protect themselves. Each memory fueled his determination. Even as the weight of the baby in his arms reminded him how fragile life could be, the woman finally whispered something, a name, and the sound struck him with a shock he hadn't expected. It hinted at connections he couldn't yet see, a link between the child he was trying to save and the one she had lost. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of damp earth and pine, and with it, a sense that the forest itself was watching, holding its secrets close. The mountain man and the woman stood on the edge of revelation, and one question lingered in the freezing air. Could they face the truth without losing everything they held dear? The mountain man tightened his grip on the baby, feeling each fragile breath as if the child's life depended solely on him, which, at that moment, it did. The woman stepped closer, her hands trembling, her voice barely a whisper as she repeated the name again, the one that had haunted her dreams for weeks. Her eyes searched his face, searching for recognition, for answers, for hope, but all she found was a man worn by the mountains, carrying a secret she couldn't yet understand. The forest seemed to close in around them. Shadows stretched longer, dark and foreboding, and the wind carried an eerie hush that made every sound the rustle of leaves, the distant crack of a branch feel magnified. The mountain man felt a chill beyond the cold, a sense that time itself had slowed, waiting for something irreversible to unfold. Questions pressed from every side. Was this baby somehow connected to the child the woman had lost? Could the answers lie in the shadows they were too afraid to face? And if so, were they ready for what they might uncover? The tension between them grew, a silent force that pulled at their hearts, blending fear with urgency, grief with a fragile spark of hope. The woman's voice cracked as she stepped closer, brushing a strand of hair from her face, revealing the raw anguish in her eyes. The mountain man knew the moment was coming, the revelation that could change everything, that could shatter lives, or bring the chance of redemption. The forest held its breath, the baby's tiny cries grew sharper, and the two of them stood on the precipice of truth, unsure if the next second would bring salvation, or heartbreak. Just as the mountain man began to sense a fragile connection forming between the woman and the baby, a sudden rustling in the underbrush froze them both. From the shadows emerged a figure tall, silent, and watching. The woman's eyes widened in shock, and she took an involuntary step back, her grip on the shawl tightening. The stranger's presence carried an unspoken warning, a danger that neither of them had anticipated. The mountain man instinctively shielded the baby, his jaw tightening as adrenaline surged through him. He could feel the tension crackling in the air, thick and heavy, as though the forest itself was holding its breath. The stranger stepped closer, and the woman's face paled. There was recognition in her eyes, a mixture of fear and disbelief, but she couldn't speak fast enough to explain. Then came the words low, sharp, and chilling. The stranger claimed knowledge about the baby, about the child the woman had lost, and about secrets neither the mountain man nor the young woman had expected to be exposed. The revelation threatened to unravel everything, the connection they had just begun to feel, the hope of saving the baby, and the possibility of closure for the woman's grief. The forest seemed to tighten around them, as questions multiplied. Who was this stranger? Why had they appeared now, at the exact moment the mountain man had risked everything to save a life? And most importantly, what truths were buried in the shadows, ready to change everything they thought they knew? The baby stirred, a faint whimper echoing through the trees, and the woman's hands trembled as her fear collided with the urgent need to protect what remained. The stakes had risen. Trust, survival, and the fragile hope of reunion now balanced on a knife's edge. And the mountain man realized that the next moment could change all their lives forever. The stranger's eyes locked onto the mountain man, and for a tense moment, the forest was completely silent, broken only by the baby's soft, uneven breaths. Then the woman stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear in her chest. She revealed the truth. The baby in the mountain man's arms was impossibly her own child, taken weeks earlier in a cruel twist of fate and presumed lost forever. Her sobs turned to relief and disbelief as she reached for the baby, her hands trembling as she cradled the tiny life. She had mourned. The mountain man felt a wave of exhaustion and relief wash over him. All the treacherous paths he had walked, all the sleepless nights in the mountains, had led to this single moment. The woman's tears mingled with his own quiet satisfaction. He had saved a life and reunited a mother with her child. Yet, even in this moment of triumph, the stranger remained, a shadow lingering in the corner of the clearing. As the woman held her baby close, the stranger stepped forward, lowering their hood. It was someone the mountain man had never expected, a figure from his past, carrying a message that would shatter the fragile peace. The stranger revealed that the danger that had taken the baby once before was not gone, and that their safety was still uncertain. The woman's eyes widened in horror, the baby stirring in her arms, and the mountain man's heart tightened. Just when they thought the worst was over, the forest whispered its final warning. Survival, trust, and love were still on the line. And in that quiet, tense moment, one thing became terrifyingly clear. This story was far from over. The mountain man stepped closer, his gaze firm but calm, and spoke quietly to the stranger. Slowly, the tension in the clearing began to ease. The stranger, seeing the determination and care in the man's eyes, revealed the final truth. The threat that had separated the baby from her mother had been neutralized, and no harm would come to them again. Relief washed over the woman, who clutched her child tightly. Feeling the warmth and life that had once seemed lost forever, the mountain man watched them for a moment, letting the quiet settle. The forest around them, which had held so many secrets and shadows, seemed to exhale, as if acknowledging the end of a long, harrowing journey. He had come into the mountains to save a life, and in doing so, had helped heal a broken heart. The woman's gratitude was quiet but deep, her tears of sorrow replaced with tears of joy. She promised to never let the child out of her sight again, and the mountain man knew that in this small victory, he had made a difference that would echo far beyond the trees. As they prepared to leave the forest, the woman looked at the mountain man with a newfound respect and trust, knowing that some bonds were formed in moments of danger and shared hope. The baby, now calm in her arms, cooed softly, a reminder of life's fragility and resilience. Walking away, the mountain man felt a quiet pride, knowing that even in the harshest wilderness, courage, compassion, and connection could prevail. And though the forest held its secrets still, one truth remained clear. Hope and humanity could guide anyone through the darkest paths, no matter how impossible the journey seemed.